The gallery's front doors gleamed beneath flickering neon, their glass dulled by drizzle and the smears of 100 disappointed palms. I stood outside with my presentation roll pressed to my chest, thick raindrops trickling inside my collar. My jaw clenched as if that would hold my body together. From behind those doors, laughter floated out, cultured, brittle, and when the director finally appeared in the vestibule, he didn't step beyond the threshold. His cardigan matched the wet pavement, grey and indistinct. "Thank you for coming, Daniel," he said, and the syllables sounded scripted, tossed together in the half-light. "Really, quite an intriguing proposal. But we've settled on other work this season. You're welcome to resubmit next year." I stared straight at him. I could feel the curve of steel beneath my skin, could feel my ears burning. "You said yourself Vancouver needs this, Roger. Something that really belongs to the city." He smiled, the kind of smile that slices. "Your plans are ambitious, a little impractical perhaps. Some boundaries are there for a reason." His eyes flickered behind me, already flicking to the next guest, the next polite rebuff. "Take care getting home." I wanted to tell him where he could shove his boundaries. Instead, I bit back the words and pressed the portfolio tighter, rain soaking through the cardboard and sending the ink bleeding into the edges. I turned without another word and stepped out into the downpour. That walk home was a blur of neon glances and wet curbs. Each step splashed up cold filth, soaking my shoes. By the time I reached my building, my heart was pounding so loudly it filled my ears. Up 3 flights, lights flickering overhead, the battered door shuddering under my fist. I burst into the cramped little kitchen where Mom sat at the table, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug. She looked up, eyes settling on the presentation tube bundled in my arms. The silence lingered thick. "Did they like it?" she asked finally. I slid the tube onto the counter. "They said it wasn't realistic." She nodded, neither relieved nor sympathetic, simply resigned. Then, as if divining my next move, her lips pressed together. "You could still sit for the public service exam next month. Your cousin's husband said there's an opening in the office downtown." I didn't answer. The words sat between us, echoing every family dinner I could remember. Even as a kid, stacking cardboard boxes into crude skyscrapers, I knew when her patience was running out. All those years sketching towers in the margins of my homework, and now this. At dinner 2 nights later, in Aunt Lena's overlit dining room, my failures became the evening special. She raised her wine glass and gave me a look like I'd tracked mud across her Persian rugs. "These things can be hobbies, Daniel. We need practicality. Your parents did everything for you. You think Vancouver is going to let you build your fantasy?" Uncle Howard snorted, swirling his scotch. "You ever seen a building like that down at the city commission? People want condos, not what is it, a garden in the sky?" "Community Sanctuary Center," I said, surprising myself. There was steel in my voice this time. "Mixed use, open air, connected." Dad cut me off, polite but tired. "Roger's known around town, son. If he's not interested, maybe that's your answer. Why not apply for a firm? Start small." Mom's hands fluttered. "You know Mrs. Chu's cousin. Their son works at Hudson and Gale. Entry-level, but..." Aunt Carla set down her fork. "We don't want to see you still at our table in 10 years, honey." I listened, face hot, rage coiling tight and quiet beneath my ribs. My hands trembled slightly under the table, but I kept them folded in my lap, cutting the world down to manageable slices. Nobody pressed further. Their judgment lived in the heavy air, in the clink of utensils and the careful avoidance of my eyes. I resolved that night I would never let them see what I carried home, never let them see me ache, but I didn't forget. Every slight, every raised eyebrow, every small, sharp mockery, that was mortar. Each would become part of something real if I could just make it through. I took odd jobs, sight hand for renovations, drafting for real estate agents who didn't care what the blueprints meant. I watched half my university cohort filter into tidy offices, lose weight, buy iron shirts. Each year, those glossy Christmas cards from my cousin's new apartment stacked up in the mailbox, their faces smug rectangles against vast windows. By February, my landlord reminded me that the grace period couldn't stretch forever. I worked nights painting walls in high rises and days drafting for a soulless prefab operation. Every so often, I'd catch my reflection in the glass walls of an elevator, hollow-eyed and raw. For years, the phone only rang for rent collectors and occasional work. I'd call Mom twice a month and she'd ask, gently, if I'd made any new friends, and less gently if I was ready to grow up. It was a storm living through those years. I didn't thrive, but I didn't quit. Some nights after all hands went home, I'd stay at the drafting table, sketching lines no one would ever see. My sanctuary center developed scars from every rejection. I stitched and restitched the design in the darkness, making it lighter, stronger. I poured the ache into the arches, carved hope into steel and glass with every trembling hand. Everything changed in early spring, 5 years after that gallery night. I was hunched over a cluttered drafting table at a small firm near Commercial Drive, moonlighting for extra cash, when a call came from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Daniel," I answered, expecting cold formality. A woman's voice, crisp but warm. "Mr. Lau, my name is Farah Ali. I'm with the Downtown Urban Renewal Initiative. I came across your community sanctuary project. Where did you come up with this?" I stammered something, my throat still felt tight from the paint fumes, but as she talked, real curiosity, real interest, something opened up in me. It was as if I'd been waiting behind a glass window for years, never daring to knock. They invited me to meet the board, and then, after half a dozen tense evenings and frantic revisions, they asked for a full model. I sold 2 months of rent to buy materials, spending nights shaping foam and glassine until my fingers blistered. Each cut reminded me of Aunt Lena's eye roll, the pitch of Dad's sigh. That spring brought the city alive, heavy with cherry blossom scents and the brine off Falls Creek. The morning I presented the model to the initiative's board, the city was shining and damp beneath soapy sunlight. I stood before a half-moon of stern faces, their skepticism measured in pen clicks and muttered notes. Farah smiled, her hands steady but her voice subdued. "Explain the heart of it, Daniel." I gestured to the model, ribboned terraces, green canopies, winding walkways. "This is for our city. Vancouver always chases what's next, what's new, but forgets who's already here. Old and young, immigrant and local, artists, workers, everyone. The design brings them together, not in an antiseptic box but somewhere alive. Community gardens, resource spaces, galleries, a food market, workshops. And the structure's modular, you build what you can, let it grow with the community." The board members sat hushed in that glass-walled room, the sun melting across the floor. When they finally spoke, there was no laughter, just questions, practical and pointed. I felt the old fire rising, rage tamed now, used to pitching against cold logic. Farah nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. "We'll need to review. But this is remarkable, Daniel." In a silent elevator afterwards, my hands shook so much that I jammed them into my pockets. 2 weeks later, the project was approved. Staggered funding, modest at first, yet more concrete than anything I'd ever held. I called Mom that night, breathless. "They picked your idea," she said, as if testing reality. "Yes, Mom, they picked it." The silence was so different now. Not hopeful, not disapproving, simply shocked. "Congratulations," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing overnight truly gets built in Vancouver. There's always paperwork, environmental approvals, furious neighbors battling each change." Yet Farah's team fought for us through every meeting and setback. I learned to make my case to people who weren't paid to listen, 1,000 versions of my family, doubting every line and curve. Months bled into seasons. I lived on black coffee and overtime, traveling from construction sites at dawn to cramped strategy meetings at night. Contractors fought over budgets, civic committees debated tree placement and ramp access. Nothing was untouched. I kept watching for the moment someone would pull the rug, send me back to dishwater and rental agreements. But the structure grew. Columns went up, steel shining against Vancouver's steady grey skies. I ran my hand along unfinished beams, pulse thundering, watching strangers move among the half-built terraces. And when troubles flared, whether money, inevitable skepticism, I gritted my teeth and pressed on. Rage still lived inside me, quieter now, tempered with hope. That winter, 6 years since rejection night, the community sanctuary was complete. Invitations went out for the opening, stamped with city crests and elegant script. They sent 1,000, but Farah smiled quietly as she handed me a special stack herself. "For your family, your community, the skeptics." I stared at the envelope, stiff under my fingertips. My mouth was dry for days. Opening day came cloudy, chill air thick with cedar and wet earth. The sanctuary's terraces rose from the pavement, green and pale concrete, strong and airy at the same time. Planters overflowed with new grass, budding and wild, drawing the wandering feet of visitors. The lower levels pulsed with music, food, laughter, the air alive with hopeful chaos. I waited near the main entrance, close to the gallery where it all started, the portfolio tube now enshrined in a display. One by one, the doubters arrived, suited and careful, Aunt Lena sharp-eyed even now. Uncle Howard, face pinched above a crisp overcoat, Dad and Mom, hands clasped as if uncertain whether to be proud. They walked through the wide, sunlit arch, pausing beneath the letters that spelled sanctuary in clean, bold steel. Beyond them, children darted among garden boxes, seniors sipped tea on the benches, and a dozen artists painted murals beneath the walkways. Aunt Lena's voice shook a little, but she hid it with a sniff. "Was this all your design?" I nodded, leading them deeper in. "Mine, but with help. No one builds anything completely alone." Uncle Howard brushed his hand along a planter wall, pretending not to be impressed. "Never thought you'd get those permits." I smiled a hard, small smile. Lots of people didn't. We reached the open atrium where sunlight pierced the glass roof, illuminating a mural of winding sea and mountains, city and forest layered together. The names of every contributor, every neighborhood committee and volunteer snaked around the pillars. Mom stared at the names, tracing mine with her fingertip. "That's yours," she whispered. A wave of sound swept through as the mayor approached, cameras trailing. Behind her, city officials and reporters mingled with artists and children. The mayor motioned for me, her voice ringing out across the gathering. "It's my honor to officially open the Vancouver Community Sanctuary. The vision behind this place belongs to Daniel Lau, a son of this city who refused to let go of his dream. This center represents hope, resilience, and the communal spirit we need in these changing times." She gestured for me to step up beside her, camera shutters clicking, microphones pointed. I saw my family front and center, faces unreadable. I spoke, voice clear, hands steady, rage washed down to its last ember. "When I brought this idea forward, some people told me it was impossible, too big, too different. But every city needs places like this where anyone can belong. We did this together, all of us." Applause thundered out. The skeptics in my family couldn't help but clap along. After the crowd thinned, reporters drifted over. Farah brought the project archives, a thick album of photos from the first sketch to the last bolt. She placed it in my hands. "I want your people to see this," she said quietly. "Let them know what you built." I handed the book to Aunt Lena, letting her thumb through the images. Her eyes misted as she lingered over each stage, the framework in the mist, the planting of the first poppies. Dad placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip strong. "You built something real, Daniel." I closed my eyes for a bruised moment. When the last guests slipped away, my family lingered in the stillness of the new sanctuary. Mom brushed a loose petal off a bench, her face unreadable but proud. Aunt Carla looked around, taking in the laughter in the upper garden, the families resting under the arches. "For the first time I could remember," she said quietly, "Vancouver needed this. You were right." As dusk fell, colors blurring through glass and steel, I stood among my people, the skeptics, the doubters, the family who doubted but never left. The sound of their voices mingled with the low hum of a city that had finally let me build my dream. I felt anger dissolve at last, replaced by the weight and relief of return. This was my home, my sanctuary in the rain, built from the very stones they once hurled. I made it for all of us, and nothing would ever undo that.